Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. And bringing our faith into our parenting is what we've been talking about for the last couple episodes with our good friend Debbie Reddick. So far, over the last couple weeks, we have discussed parenting littles, the children, those toddlers up and through the grade school years, and then we've talked about how to parent high schoolers who are now getting a little bit more independent and have to start making their own decisions. If you've not had a chance to listen to those two episodes, by all means, go back and listen to them. Maybe after listening to this episode, whatever order you want to. But some great wisdom was shared really for any season of life. There's some ground things that we've talked about with Debbie. Having that devotional time every night has been a big one. It sounds like that helped as they transitioned into the next season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And having some ground rules. Right. Church every Sunday was one, probably bigger for the high school kids because they are maybe starting to, want to do their own thing.
Right. Sleep longer.
Yeah, sleep longer. I understand that. But setting that ground rule and making sure they're getting exposed to Christian community as they're also getting exposed to non-Christian community. Right. So now, as we dive in, first, welcome back, Debbie. Thank you so much for being with us again. We're going into the college years. They're getting out of high school. They're maybe getting out of the house. What were some of the biggest differences you noticed as a parent as they launched into those years? Yeah, how was that different for you guys?
Well, first of all, it's a grieving process for the ones at home when somebody leaves and goes to college. I mean, they're not gone, but they're not in your home. And that was one of the first things I realized was that, they're not under your roof, under your protection all the time. And even as each one went on, I would have friends say, this is my first graduating, but this is easy for you because you already had some go on to college. And I'm like, every person in your family has their place. And when that place is empty, when they've left, it really impacts the family. And you miss them. You miss their gifts and you miss their personality and all the things that they brought to your family. But it is scary because you hope that you've done enough to keep them grounded. You have to let go. You're not going to be there to rescue or to, rebuke or to kind of try to steer them, differently. Now they have to make their own choices, and you just cover them in prayer, praying that the things that you have, taught them at home and that they've learned at church will stick with them, and that perhaps their conscience will, or, God pricking their hearts or the Holy Spirit will, be enough to cause them to, keep them stay the course. It's the letting go that's really hard.
Sure.
That's
I can imagine on the grounds of, again, one of the many things we talked about before starting this recording, we touched on baseball. Mm-hmm. And when what makes a great team in any sport is when every player knows their role and fills their role, and you get the whole thing functioning like a well-oiled machine. Right. Those are the teams that tend to be unstoppable come the end of the year. So likewise, and then when you lose those players, my team just made the World Series. They just lost the World Series, and one of our biggest players is hitting free agency. So I'm like, oh man, we just figured this out. Right. We could lose this guy. So I do understand the importance of that. But I never really thought about that in the terms of a family. Yeah, is when one person goes off to college, the dynamic has shifted. Yeah. The house is now different.
Right.
And it is probably healthy, though, to grieve that a little bit. Yeah. To recognize for you, and then probably your whole family seeing that, this is hard for you. It's probably important to acknowledge that because everybody has to recognize it's going to be a little different going forward.
Right. Right. And you don't know, if they're going to ever come back home. You don't know, God's plan for them and, how all that's going to play out. But you just, like I said, you have to let go. At the same time, you're hoping that they understand too that the faith that you taught them has to become their own. They have to at some point make their personal decision for Christ. And thankfully, we were blessed. I think all of ours, before they went off to college, had already made that decision. But, we don't hang on the coattails of our parents for forever. And at some point, it has to become a personal decision. And so, you just pray that also will be something that if they haven't already done, that they will somehow make some connections in college, which it's much harder there than it is when you're at home and in high school.
Yeah. And there are these pre-built or even like semi-required activities that are going to expose them to friendships or, Christian relationships now that they're off into college. You said something before we started that I thought was interesting. You required was maybe the word you used, but they had to do, was it true what they had to do 1 year on campus at least?
My husband and I had told them that we would like them to spend 1 year on campus, just because we didn't want them to come back and say, gosh, I never, lived on campus. I never knew what college was like.
It's a different experience for sure.
It is. And some of them, as soon as that first year was done, if they went to Bowling Green or UT, they would okay, I'm ready to be, live at home and I'll commute and whatever, which was fine. But I didn't want them to, look back one day and say, I just never knew what that was like. I don't know what that was like. And so,
which is something I hear from kids who never did it. I feel it having gone to art school and not regular college. Like I never did the homecoming thing.
Right. I went to nursing.
Yeah,
I went to nursing school. It was in the hospital. I mean, our dorm was connected to the hospital, and we walked under a tunnel to the hospital to do our clinicals. And we, the sisters from Lourdes would come to the school to do some of our classes. And, other than that, we were on a charter bus out to Lourdes, and the people in our class were still the nursing students that we were with all the time. So it wasn't a normal college experience. And I often wondered what that would have been like.
Yeah.
I got a great education, but and that's why we thought, it would be good for them to have 1 year. And some of them were like, I don't want to waste any more money, living on campus. I mean, a lot of them, that was their choice. Several of them did a year and then went into military and then came back and finished after they were done, doing boot camp and getting established in the military. So, it was their choice, but we did want them to do 1 year on campus.
Yeah. Which I think, again, is good to give them that one last requirement to require them to be brave.
Right.
Do something different.
Yeah.
Do something a little uncomfortable, which has kind of been almost the opposite of you have to come to church every Sunday.
Right. Yeah.
Now we're like, all right, now go. Get out.
Yeah.
But not in a bad way, obviously, but expose yourself to that because it is a good experience. And it's, I don't know, it's like going back to that when your kid was in 5th grade, encouraging them to stick with that, do something difficult, do something uncomfortable, and have their faith meet the road.
Right.
Here is kind of a similar idea now, many years later, of hey, we're going to encourage you to do something difficult, do something different, and now you're going to do it on your own.
Right.
Which is kind of a natural progression of discipleship. My wife was listening to a podcast earlier this afternoon about that the kind of the discipleship mentorship pattern is watch me do it.
Yes.
And then I will show you how to do it. And then you will do it and I will watch.
Right. Yeah.
And then you'll do it.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of at that season. Talk to me then about, because this is a different type of parenting here. We're very hands-on early on. Yeah. Then you're kind of taking the hands off the rein a little bit, letting them make some of their own decisions, but still have some requirements for them. As they go into college, now it has to be almost like parenting from afar.
Right.
How does that work? What did you guys do as the kids started to go to encourage their faith?
You do have to let go, and you have to trust God that you have, you just pray that the seed that was implanted in them is taking root and growing, and that praying that He will put good Christian friends in their path, or good Christian people in their path to, help them to see that there's someone else, like we had talked about earlier, other people who have the same values and share the same beliefs and everything to keep them grounded. But, again, letting them know that you are their biggest fan and their biggest prayer warrior, and that, if they need anything, they just call you. But not asking too many questions, because I think, sometimes when you seem to be digging more into, too personal stuff, that might shut them off. And, but knowing that if there's something they want to address with you, that you're going to listen, and you're not going to preach, and you're not going to scold. And, you just,
those two.
Yeah. It's more, because I know when they would call with certain situations that they did share, I would be on the other end of the phone, just praying, God, give me wisdom to share, what I can, what you would have me to share, just to kind of help direct them. Like, right. I mean, they would have to choose to go in that direction, but just the thoughts that maybe would be of him that would help them to make a choice that would be honoring to him, and, would keep them within, we talked about those bounds on the last podcast, keep them within the boundary of his precepts, his commands, his will.
Yeah. What did you say? Don't preach. And don't judge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to imagine that's probably kind of hard, kind of tricky, because again, you've got kids on every spectrum here still.
Yeah.
So certain kids, that is what you're going to be more hands-on with the information you're giving them and how you're guiding them.
Right.
But with your college kids,
that's
not going to work.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just listening. I mean, it's kind of like, I think the relationship between a husband and wife, sometimes it's you're kind of dumping on your spouse your concerns about your work or whatever. You're not expecting them to fix it.
Right.
You just need to unload. And I think that's the same thing with our kids. As they go to college and as they're into adulthood, sometimes they just need to dump. And they just need somebody who listens and says, that's a really hard situation. And a lot of times I would find that they would come to an answer of maybe what they should do themselves just by dumping. We can't always fix it.
Right. Well, and that's probably an outcome of, we've quoted that scripture of raising your kids
right, the way
in
they
the
should
Lord,
go.
in the way they should go.
Yeah.
And then I think another part of that verse is that they will not depart from it.
Right.
Because what I was thinking as you were saying of talking about them dumping and just getting it off their chest, they're developing adults now.
Right.
They're smart.
Yeah.
Right. By getting all out of their system, they'll probably start to figure it out themselves as they get out the clutter, and they'll be able to then connect the dots, and just being that sounding board to listen, that safe space where they know they can come to. Yeah. Is oftentimes all they need. Because
it's exactly, they would, as they would just release it, they would a lot of times come to their own decision, then be like, well, thanks, Mom. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. But, you just there to listen and not try to fix.
Yeah. Yeah, because it has to be their own choice.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I think that's the hardest part. At some point, you kind of have to stop parenting your kids. They have to learn to do it for themselves.
Right.
And take what you've taught them and put it to practice. Right. And being that sounding board is probably the safest way to do that.
Well, and the nice thing is you can pray your heart out. You can pray like crazy. And that is one thing you can always do. Doesn't matter what age. And, you're not going to, I will always cover my kids in prayer.
Yeah. That's where I was going to go next, is like, what were the spiritual practices for you and Brad in those seasons as your kids are getting into college? Because everything that you're doing and talking about for your kids really probably only works if you also have a relationship with God.
Right.
Otherwise, you probably have nothing to give them.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you're praying while they're talking to you. So what are some of the other practices when they're not on the phone?
Here's one thing, and I wish I had mentioned this back, like when we did the podcast on the teenage years. Sometimes my kids learned that they could never either leave the house or get on the bus until we had prayed with them, or I had prayed with them if Brad had already gone to work. They knew that they could not, that was something. And they, might be a roll of the eye or something, but they would just come over and say, come on, Mom, we got to go. And I would, pray over them. Same thing sometimes with some of their sports. It would be like, you're not leaving for your game until I pray over you. Just, for protection, that they would be a good sport, that they would show good sportsmanship, that they would be, mindful of, whatever it might be.
It's biblical.
But, yeah.
You're essentially blessing your children.
But sometimes, and especially as they're adults, sometimes, you're talking on the phone and you're thinking, you might be saying, well, I'm going to be praying for you for that. And in your mind, it's like, do it right now. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're thinking, oh, they're going to think I'm so stupid, or like, here she goes again. But, we need to do that. Yeah. And so get out of your comfort zone, bite the bullet, and just do it. You might, don't worry if your kids think you're stupid or, goofy or whatever. Just do it. And it will become more and more natural the more you do it. But it's breaking into that. Mm-hmm. If you haven't been doing that, breaking into it and making it a normal.
That's really what it is. Mm-hmm. That's really what it is making it part of the culture, part of the norm.
Right. And
house.
So when they're on the phone with you and they're struggling with something, it's okay to say, you know what, I just want us to stop for a minute and I'm just going to pray for you right now. That I think means so much to them. Mm-hmm. And let them know you're going to continue to pray for them. But and you got to not feel, you might feel odd about it, but it will eventually feel normal.
I think my
they'll
mom
expect
did that.
It.
Yeah, my mom's done that for me a couple times. And it does mean something because it lets you know you're watched, you're cared for, and the words of the prayer are often what they need to hear, what I needed to hear. So there are definitely times my mom was definitely, she's very strong in her faith and her Bible, and there were definitely some eye rolls over the years. I'm like, oh, come on, Mom. But what she said would stick.
Yeah.
And, or like she'd say, if I presented a situation to her, she's like, well, this is what you probably should do. I'm like, oh, nah, come on.
Yeah.
Well, then I'd hang up the phone and think about it and go, dang it. She's right.
Yeah.
That's the right thing to do.
Right.
So, and I think it's all that intentionality thing again. It's your house. It's your family. Going back to baseball again, it's how I look at like managers of a baseball team. Mm-hmm. They're managing full-grown men. So they're not telling them how to hit the ball necessarily. You may be coaching and doing that kind of thing, but like once they're out on the field, especially in baseball, they are autonomous beings out there.
Right. They got to do what they were trained to do.
Yeah. What you do at that point of a baseball manager's career, is you have to let them go out and do what they were taught to do. It's your job to manage kind of the atmosphere in the clubhouse and the pace of the clubhouse. And so the same way in our homes, like once our kids are getting into those adult years, all we can do is still like manage base camp, manage the home, and still be a safe place in the Lord and a place where they can come to, they can retreat to if they need to, and have that sounding board, have that safe space so they can go out and, learn to make the right decisions. That's probably the key word is learn to make the right decisions.
Yeah. And another thing, as our kids got phones, which a lot of them didn't get them till college. Some of them, like it was maybe their junior, senior year. But what we do have, and I think a lot of families do, is a family group text. And that's where, we can, of course, there's a lot of funny things that are shared and whatever, but sometimes it's like, hey guys, so-and-so has this going on, please keep them covered in prayer. And that brings us even closer together to be able, privileged to support each other in prayer during, job interviews or a difficult time or even praises,
That's cool. Yeah.
Seeing an answered prayer, just how God worked in a situation and saying, we can, let's praise God for this because it's a blessing and we need to share those as well.
And it's a great way to keeps you guys connected.
It does.
That's really
anything,
cool.
I think when they get to college age on, it's our role and what we want to do is try to maintain the relationships.
Sure.
Keep the relationships growing, even though that person's not necessarily in the house.
Right.
Anymore.
And embrace the new season.
Right.
And embrace more in the loss, but embrace your new role.
And
in
not
their lives,
let them feel like they are now, not connected.
Yeah.
We want to keep them connected, even if they don't want to. But at the same time, just maintaining and continuing to grow those relationships in that season, like you said.
Yeah. So I want to touch on something here because you mentioned phones. Yeah. And that was a shifting reality for you. I'm sure your kids, that was not a thing when you started.
Right.
But by the time your youngest is going through, like, cell phones are now just a regular part of life.
Right.
How was, this kind of probably goes back a little bit into the high school years, but how did you guys handle the whole cell phone thing?
Well,
because that's a big one for a lot of parents.
Part of it was we really couldn't afford to do the cell phones.
Sure.
But then it became, once we could, put somebody on here and there, I would do that like for college or what. I remember one of them, John, actually, I think it was in college, and the professor said, pull out your cell phone. And he's like, I don't have a cell phone. Mm-hmm. And the response he got from the professor was, well, I don't know what you're going to do then. It's not it wasn't a prerequisit. It wasn't a requirement on the list. Syllabus. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. And, kind of the same thing when my youngest was maybe a junior in high school. She didn't have a cell phone yet. And it did become a little bit of a problem with some of her sports stuff and people trying to communicate because, that was difficult. But, and we didn't have text. The thing was, we just couldn't afford it.
Right.
The kids didn't seem to, they weren't bitter about that. But I will say, having worked in the schools and especially at the high school for, how long was I there at the high school? 13 years, 14 years. Cell phones do a lot of damage. They're helpful. And they can be good, but they can do a lot of damage. And I would see that on a daily basis at the high school. Yeah. It brought a lot of emotional issues into the clinic that manifested as physical symptoms that, once I would talk to a student and kind of go through my questions, realize this student isn't having the physical issue is a result of this emotional issue that is being caused by this phone, whether it be parents would call the office and say, hey, I'm trying to reach my child and they're not responding. Well, they're in class.
Yeah.
Or somebody would post something on social media and they would see it and it would be upsetting to them and you'd have to get the counselor involved in everything. And I just, there is a real negativity to cell phones, even as useful and helpful as they can be. And I would just encourage parents to really think very deeply about how soon they get cell phones. And, it alienates kids sometimes. And it does. And sometimes I'd feel like, we've gotten to a point where we just don't know how to do relationships because of it. There's, face-to-face contact or, all you have to do is look on Facebook and some of the groups, and you've got even the adults spewing things out there that if they would wait, I sometimes think about how I don't know if it still is a thing, but if you bought something, you had 3 days to cancel the sale if you decided you changed your mind. People need to learn to do that with their emotional things that they put, because a lot of times if you wait on something that's really flipped your trigger, if you wait till the next day, it's not as bad. Yeah. And you start to think about, well, how could I handle that differently? But once you put those words out there, they're out there, and it does a lot of damage. And I see that damage in kids. I've seen it in kids in high school.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's been tough. But so, maybe it was a blessing that we couldn't afford the cell phones during that time, because we didn't have to deal with a lot of that.
Yeah, well, I considered it a blessing for me. I grew up as cell phones. The first smartphone didn't come out until I was a sophomore in college. Is when the iPhone first comes out. I didn't have a smartphone until I was 25. I didn't want one at that point because I could already see how much the addiction, the damage, what it was doing to people and to our culture. I just eventually caved because there are good things about it, the communication aspect.
Yeah.
This is why parents often give their kids cell phones so they can stay in touch and keep up with the sports, keep up with where they are. You mentioned the blessing of it in college, having that group chat where you can still keep in touch and they can still feel part of the family. I do wish that our culture, like you get a driver's license at 16 because that's when we consider kids to be physically and emotionally mature enough to handle that responsibility. I really wish we had phone licenses. Yeah. Because there's a certain level of learning that should also happen with those because there's so much happening in those phones. Absolutely. The technology used to make them, the technology that the social media platforms use to keep you using them is not something we should just take for granted, in my opinion. This is probably a podcast for another time. So we'll wrap up our bit about cell phones here, but just, I also have heard, like, for parents who can't afford it, I have read that, like, that's not actually being in positions where you are financially tight is not a disadvantage. Right. Inherently. It's all in how you handle it. Yeah. And some of it, we were financially strapped growing up. I am so grateful as an adult because it taught me to be responsible for what I do have. Right. And to use things responsibly, like cell phones, which as an adult, I'm still figuring out. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is that what we're trying to teach our kids too is to see God as their source. And what happens, is all of us sometimes will go to our cell phones or go to somebody else when we're emotionally upset or, whatever issue we might be facing, and rely on those things to bring us the peace and the comfort when we should be seeking God first.
Amen.
And then we can reach out to others. But that's something that in a season of life I'm going through right now, where I'm now at home alone, and I haven't been before, is, there's the first night I just thought, I need to call and talk to somebody. I thought, no, I don't. I need to be just spending some time with God because he is the one. I mean, he's gotten me through lots of things and he'll get me through this struggle. Right. And this, and it's just too easy for us to go to somebody else. But we need to make him our source.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice for the parent who's just sent their last kid off to college.
Right.
Now that life, the team has moved out of the clubhouse. Yeah. What do you do? Where do you start? That's probably the place because that was something, again, one of our many pre-show conversations. I talked about deleting my baseball app off my phone. Right. Part of that was because I was, very active 1-year-old. Both my wife and I work full-time jobs. I noticed I was running to the baseball app just to check stats, seemingly harmless enough. Right. But I noticed I was starting to run to that before going to God, before paying attention to my family. And it's those consequences we talked about of this thing that looks like this is the easier path. I can just let my mind roam free in some baseball stats for a little bit. There's a price to that. Right. Now I'm not paying attention to my family. I'm not paying attention to my faith. Eliminating that freed up a lot of healthy things that are actually much more freeing. Spending time with God, spending time with paying attention to my crazy kid, who is awesome. Yeah. And paying attention to those little moments that I may have otherwise missed.
Well, and I've never walked away from a time with God thinking, I could have spent that time better.
So true. It's so frustrating how thick-headed I now feel because I'm like, I've never gone to church and regretted it. I've never put that extra time in with God and been like, wow, geez, I wish I would have doom scrolled a little longer. Right. I never have the time. I never, I'm on social media and I never remember what it was I saw anyway.
Exactly.
We're just going for the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Well, we've trailed into the pit of social media at this point, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this. And it's different. It's a challenge because now the kids are out of the home,
right?
And finding that way to maintain that connection while letting them make their own decisions, while letting them choose their path at this point.
Right.
But that's possible through the groundwork that you've laid. And hopefully we as parents are looking to lay in our lives of having a Bible time in our home that's regular, that's consistent. Having some ground rules for the house while you're in my house. That's okay. It is your house.
And I will say that when I babysit grandchildren, and if it's at night, it's always fun because they'll get out the devotion book and we'll either be in somebody's bedroom or in the hallway, just as my kids did growing up. And I'm thinking, it's sticking, and I love it.
Yeah, that is the fruit of the labor right there, and that's probably has to be incredibly satisfying. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's okay for us to have traditions and routines in our families, in our homes. I feel like as parents, sometimes we're afraid to be restrictive of our kids, but it's healthy restrictive.
It is.
Where, like, again, I do not regret, and my baseball team did better than they have in 32 years this year, and I do not regret at all deleting that app and spending more intentional time with my family, with my kids, and more intentional time with God.
Yep.
I'm like happy for my team. They did good this year. I don't regret. I don't feel like I've missed anything by not watching the games or, doom scrolling through a bunch of stats that don't matter. So, but I think our encouragement then is for parents to be intentional.
Right.
In our walk of faith, it has to be real for us.
It has to be modeled, and get out of your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to establish those, prayers and things. Even if you feel like your kids are going to think you're goofy.
For the record, I feel like that's normal.
Yeah, it
Just
is.
accept that that's part of it. I have a 1.5-year-old, and I'm thinking about what you're saying and wanting to start prayer time, and that feels weird and uncomfortable for me. And I'm like, what's he going to do? Is he going to judge me? He doesn't even fully recognize what's happening, and I already am concerned that he's going to think I'm not a cool dad. Just embrace it.
Yeah, you make it part of the expectation. This is what we do in this house.
This is what we do. This is normal. And then it becomes a thing that's normal for them, and then it becomes normal for their kids.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it all comes back to that point of, like, we don't regret spending time with God.
Right, never.
And people regret more the supposed freedoms that they explore once they, all the things our culture throws at us in terms of the recreational, quote unquote, activities that we could take part in. People generally end up regretting those.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say, I spent time with God today.
Yeah.
And man, the words, I wish I wouldn't have done that, usually does not follow.
No, never.
No. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up there. Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your wisdom over these last 3 episodes. We hope for you all listening, it has been a blessing to you guys and to your families. I know it has for me, on especially being on the beginning of the opposite end of the process that you've been on. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. I think that'll be December 23rd. So I expect we'll be doing something Christmas themed. But thank you for all the parenting wisdom. It's certainly been a blessing to me. For you all listening, if you are looking forward to catching our next episode, we recommend liking, following, or subscribing to this show on the podcast app of your choice to be notified of our latest content. We post new episodes every other Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. So until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.